The arrival of the Nintendo Switch 2 is the start of a new era for Nintendo. It's a new console with new games to look forward to, and it seems like the perfect time to look back at the iconic Nintendo Switch 1. It's the little handheld powerhouse that could, and it's a console that won a special place in a lot of our hearts, letting us play our games on road trips, on flights, in waiting rooms, or even just kicking back in bed away from the TV. It released all the way back in 2017 with some all-time great first-party Nintendo games, but for several years it also became the place to play indie games on console, with a huge amount of ports leading to a stellar library of indie games on the Switch. All of this propelled the Switch to over 130 million total sales, making it Nintendo's second best-selling console ever, more than the legendary NES and Super Nintendo, more than the extremely viral Wii, and in fact it only loses out to its fellow handheld, the Nintendo DS, which sold 150 million across its many iterations. 8 years on, the Switch's hardware is well past its best, with the Tegra X1 chip struggling to run modern games, even low-spec Nintendo titles like Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and even on the OLED model, that 720p screen can be hard on the eyes. All of that will of course be remedied by the arrival of the Switch 2, and as the original Switch comes to the end of its life cycle, this video will look back across the console's storied 7-year history and highlight the indie games that I think this console will be remembered for. The list I've arrived at is a personal one. I've chosen 30 games that I love and rate highly that I think will be synonymous with the Switch era in my memory for one reason or another. And there are a couple of omissions here of beloved games that you might raise your eyebrow at, so if your favourite game isn't in this personal top 30, don't freak out in the comments, hold your horses until the end of the video, and I'll have a little chat about why I omitted some of those classic games you might be hoping for. I also want to give a quick shout out to the podcast and YouTube channel Beat Your Backlog. This video was inspired partially by a guest episode I was on recently talking about Switch nostalgia and our best Switch memories. It's an underrated channel. I will flash a link up on the screen now if you want to follow Beat Your Backlog and see that episode with me and Adam talking about our Switch memories. Give it a follow. Adam is a really great dude and Beat Your Backlog is a great new channel. As always, your likes are appreciated. You can sub to this channel for more videos like this, and I will let you know about the channel's Patreon in a bit. And with that, let's get into it. Here are my top 30 indie games of the original Nintendo Switch. If you pay any attention to indie games, you will definitely have seen Gris. It's a beautifully illustrated light platform game. And when I say light, I mean it. It's very light on gameplay. You run left to right most of the time. There are a couple of abilities that you can get, like becoming heavy to fall through things or anchor against the wind, a double jump, and another late game ability that I won't spoil here for story reasons. But I would say that this is not a mechanically focused game. It's an emotional experience as your character moves through the stages of grief depicted here as abstract environments with vast broken architecture and alien wildlife, all rendered in a distinctive flood of watercolor paint. Nomada Studio won a lot of awards for this game and it really put them on the map. The follow-up Neva came out last year, and while Neva upped the stakes with combat and set pieces, I think Gris remains purer somehow. It's more delicate, it's more affecting. It's a wordless game that will make you feel through the art and the silent narrative. And as you're basking in the colors and the surreal area designs, there's just about enough gameplay to keep you occupied. This is actually my girlfriend's favourite video game that I've shown her so far, and I too found it to be memorable and emotional, so it makes this list at number 30. That's Gris. At number 29, I have Dorfromantik. This is a game that came out in late 2022 when the Steam Deck had just released and it was starting to take hold. This is actually one of the last Switch games that I really put a lot of time into before getting my ROG Ally. And it's a low-key game, but with 40 hours played, I think it deserves a place on this list. Some games are just an easy-going good time, and that's what the Switch excels at in a way. If you compare it to things like SteamOS and Windows, the Switch has just got a more console-like experience. Because it is a console, it starts up in seconds, your games are right there, the story is one button away. It doesn't try to do anything else other than serve you games to play. Settings don't matter because it's standardized hardware, and so it's the perfect place for pick-up-and-play cozy games. And I'm not really into the farming game side of things, but I am into village builders, and this is a village builder where you get points for matching the edges of tiles like forest, water, grassland or houses. And as you match tiles, they click together satisfyingly and you get more tiles to play, and slowly but surely, tile by tile, while, a whole slice of countryside grows before your eyes. There is a unique satisfaction in seeing train networks appear and 3 houses becoming a thriving village with smoke coming from the chimneys. And there are a lot of games like this out there. There's Townscaper, there's Islanders, but this is the one that hooked me the most because there's an all-important sense of progression as you unlock new tiles, so it doesn't feel aimless, even if it is low stakes. I have 40 hours in this game, which I think says it all. I never quite gelled with cozy games like Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley, but I did gel with this one. This is my kind of cozy game. That's Dorfromantik. Back before the roguelike revival had fully kicked into gear, a couple of games were trailblazers in modernising and reigniting the genre. Motion Twin's Dead Cells was one of them, a tight, ambitious 2D roguevania, as the devs described it. You play as the prisoner who escapes from a deep dungeon and battles their way through a cursed land to ultimately slay its king. It's a procedurally generated game though, so the levels change from run to run, and on each run you collect cells which can be used to unlock permanent upgrades like potions, etc. You can also collect blueprints to upgrade your weapons, and the combat is slick and brutal. You see a selection of enemies ahead, you quickly plan your moves, and then you try to execute it as cleanly as possible without taking damage, because you are definitely going to need all of that health for the boss fights. The game has had a bunch of DLC over the years, including skins from classics like Hollow Knight and Hyperlight Drifter. It's had new areas, new enemies, new bosses, and all of that adds some welcome variety. And while I do think that the roguelike formula has been built upon in the years since by games like Rogue Legacy 2 and Hades and so forth, this is still a classic in the genre. I think it is synonymous with the Switch. It is a great game and a Switch classic. That's Dead Cells. And at number 27 we have Ape Out. This is a colourful, wild, oddball beat-em-up. It's a top-down game where you play as a gorilla escaping from a laboratory. You bash away guards and scientists and they splatter on the walls dramatically. And it also has this wild jazz soundtrack that responds to what's happening on screen. So you almost feel like a drummer and a painter as you play this game, splattering enemies and hearing the drums clatter every time you do. It also has a great development story. It was developed by a student who was attending game development classes at New York University. Bennett Foddy got involved and Matt Bosch, who was on the faculty there. It was financed by the Indie Fund and it was published by Devolver Digital, so it's a true indie game that started nowhere and finished being internationally known. It won a BAFTA and a Golden Joystick for its audio design, and I really like this game. I think it's very deserving of all of that success. It has a sense of drama and scale. The gameplay is tight. It has this great system of you not knowing what's around each corner until you turn it, so you're always flying by the seat of your pants. If you're interested in indie games, there is nothing else quite like this, so give it a try. It's right at home on Switch. That's Ape Out. At number 26, we have Paradise Killer. This game has a setting that I've never seen in a video game before. It's set in a kind of Miami Vice meets H.P. Lovecraft seaside city. It's an eternally sunny island in an odd 80s-inspired disco-tronica era. But as well as all the beaches, the condos and marinas, it's home to a death cult that has recently transcended this mortal realm, and a council of gods who shepherd the island into being reborn every few millennia are the only people who remain. So far so complicated, but there's more. When the council are all killed, you are summoned to solve the impossible sealed room murder. You wander around the empty streets past demon statues and blood-splattered altars and blocks of flats, and you question the remaining gods as they hang around waiting for the end. This makes for some super enjoyable exploration and investigation. You gather clues and red herrings all over the place, you conduct interviews with the subjects, you cross-examine, you try to break witnesses, and eventually you present your findings to the all-powerful judge. A fun thing about this whole system is that you can accuse anyone you like of the murders as long as you found evidence to back it up, true or false. It's a one-off game and a total oddball, and I will say that although it's great on Switch, a visually enhanced version was released on Steam with better reflections, textures, effects, etc. So even though it's a narrative-forward game, if you care about that stuff, I'm just putting that on your radar. But wherever you decide to play it, I think you'll have a good time. Really original game. That's Paradise Killer. At number 25 I have Katana Zero, the second Devolver published joint on this list, and certainly not the last. This one was developed by ASCII Soft, and it's another fast action title where you play as an amnesiac samurai in an odd near future world. You wake up in your tiny messy apartment and you head out on a mission to try and remember who you are. These passages of play are the main strand of the game, where you work your way through increasingly complicated levels, and the combat is fast and brutal. One hit and you die, and on the flip side, one hit and you kill. You really have to look ahead and plan your moves if you come into a situation where there is a guard with a shield, a gunman, and a swordsman in a tight office space. You have to know what you're going to do, and then you have to carry it out to perfection. For example, you might kick open the door to take out the first guard, which alerts the rest. You then have to run forwards, duck a bullet, bounce another bullet back with your sword to take out a samurai, and then rush in and kill the final dude. All of this happens in seconds, and when it goes well, it's very, very satisfying. If you fail, you just rewind, you rethink your strategy, and you go again. So cracking each level is a lot of fun. There is a lot of fail and retry, but I think it's the good kind. And while the action would be enough for the game alone, there is also quite a good story here too. You'll talk to bizarre characters who know much more about what's going on than you do, and you have to try and piece together your character in their adult mind. It is ostensibly an action game, but I do want to complement that story too, and combined with the wonderful pixel art, the compelling neo-noir sci-fi setting, great soundtrack, and precision gameplay, this is just a winner all round. Wishlist it on your Switch now. That's Katana Zero. From one John Wick-style action game to another, 24th on this list is My Friend Pedro, a surreal side-scrolling shooter that ups the ante even further. It has ambitious, at times balletic action as you platform your way through cleverly designed level, using one stick for each of your dual-wielded guns. This control scheme makes for some incredible moments, like sliding down a zipline by your feet in slow motion, taking out crowds of enemies and then landing on the ground before their bodies have crumpled to the floor. Sometimes enemies pour into the play area from both sides and open windows above you, leaving you with just seconds to figure out a course of action like a high-speed shoot-'em-up puzzle game. It's just intensely satisfying to play from moment to moment, like a steady stream of interactive action movie set pieces. There is a light touch story here to keep things flowing. You are another amnesiac protagonist. Amnesia seems to be an epidemic in video games, huh? You wake up in the back of a butcher's shop and you battle your way out and then go into gangland with a banana called Pedro for company. The banana may or may not be a hallucination of your damaged mind. It's a fun enough story, but you're really here for the action, and if that sounds good to you, then don't miss this game. That's My Friend Pedro. In the early days of the Switch, I used to tweet out quite regularly asking people to list their most underrated indie games, and one game came up more than any other. That was Battle Chef Brigade. It's a strange one. It's a mixture of cooking, action, and social sim elements, but when I started playing it, I got the hype immediately. In this world, battle chefs are big celebrities who are revered for their ability to take down monsters, then cook up all the parts into experimental cuisine. In this game, you play as Mina, a talented small-town girl who tries out the Battle Chef Academy. You get a bedroom to sleep in, you can talk to your landlady, your fellow students, and your teachers, and then you go to class where you have to do some battle chefing. This part is an interesting mix of gameplay. You're standing on a stage in front of a stove, there are judges and one competitor that you're chefing against. You will run out of stage left into a forest where you hunt down animals for meat and harvest fruit and things like that. You then race back to the stove to add them to your dish to make recipes for the judges. This is where a puzzle game element comes in as you matched colours on different ingredients to get the kind of flavour profiles you're looking for. It's super fun and satisfying, and it's a wonderfully produced game. It has a lovely fresh art style with illustrations that were clearly made with love. It has a nice soundtrack, some great inter-classmate politics, and it's a really nice length too, clocking in at about 10 hours. It also got some DLC with new characters to play as, local multiplayer, and free play cooking mode, and loads more besides. I feel like this is one of the true underrated gems of the Switch indie library, so check it out if you haven't already. That's Battle Chef Brigade. Number 22 is Eastward, and I came to this game late. I remember being transfixed by the pixel art graphics when it first came out, but I was put off by the reviews that said it was too long, that it was padded, that it was dialogue heavy, and I didn't get a review code for it, so in the end I skipped it. It took an article in Lost in Cults magazine, Lock On, to get me back on board. The article talked about the inspiration from Kowloon Walled City, where residents would walk with umbrellas even when it wasn't raining to deflect pipe water from above, where unlicensed doctors concocted homemade remedies cities with locally grown moss, and where city blocks had local cuisines not found anywhere else. So the article talked me into the game, and I'm so happy that it did. It's ostensibly a Zelda-like. It has pixel art, it has combat, NPCs, side quests, and inventory, but this game is more than the sum of its parts. It has some magic amongst the pixels. There is a really specific vibe to the dripping tenements, the stacked trailers one on top of the other, the train from the underground to the bright outdoors, and the make do and mend of it all. There are trailer wires and repurposed bus stops and Frankenstein antennas all piled on top of each other. And it's a road trip game too, where you pass through areas but you never stop, giving you a whirlwind tour kind of feel. And this isn't the last Zelda-like on this list, but it is in some ways the most memorable. Just a beautiful game, so don't make the mistake that I did. Check this one out if you haven't already. It's a really wonderful game. That's Eastward. And at number 21 we have the only rhythm game on this list. I'm not a huge rhythm game fan traditionally, but when Melatonin was first shown off at a Nintendo Direct in 2022, I jumped straight into it. It has Rhythm Heaven inspired gameplay, where songs play and repetitive graphic motions happen on the screen. You hit key inputs in time with the music and the animation in increasingly complex sequences, and then your performance is rated at the end of each level. If you do medium well, you can progress, but there's always that little itch at the back of your mind telling you to try again, play just a little bit tighter, and improve your rank to a gold or an S rank on the board. The art style and the music are a big selling point in Melatonin as well. It has this fresh vaporwave palette of pinks and purples that I think will date it nicely to the early 2020s. The same goes for the music, which is like lo-fi beats to play to. The subjects are kind of related to our times too. They're kind of millennial anxiety dreams about social media posting, doing a repetitive job, swiping on a dating app, grabbing eggs from gacha machines, playing video games late at night. And after each set of levels, you get a mega mix at the end where you need to remember all of the different inputs and timings that you've learned. It all has this dreamlike quality as your protagonist hovers on the edge of sleep between levels. It's really good stuff, and if this one passed you by first time around, if I remember right, I think it came out in December when everyone was already thinking about games of the year time. So I'm not sure that this game found as big an audience as it could have, but hey, it's right here in my best Switch indies list, which is all about games that we'll associate with the Switch era. This is one of them. That's Melatonin. That takes us into the top 20, and Death's Door and Tunic came out in the same year, and they kind of neatly divided the indie game crowd. Some liked Tunic's esoteric puzzles and Souls-like difficulty, others preferred the more down-to-earth story and gameplay of Death's Door. I fell firmly into the latter camp, so it's Death's Door that makes my list. But hey, if you're on the Tunic side of the tracks, then feel free to make the case for that game in the comments. Death's Door is a game where you play as a humble little crow who works in the bureaucracy of the afterlife, but when a simple soul collection job goes wrong, you're tasked with heading out into a liminal afterlife realm to try and fix what happened. The journey takes you through some truly memorable areas like a labyrinthine graveyard full of secrets, a swampy shantytown area with a hostile frog king, a ceramic manor home of the Urn Witch, and eventually a chilly mountaintop castle as well. I would say there are elements of Metroidvania and Zelda here. There are blood-gated combat arenas you'll need to pass, there's a skill tree with multiple weapons that you can learn, and endearing Alice in Wonderland-inspired characters. The vibe is very much a dusty fairy tale in a strange, forgotten place, and it's helped along by striking visuals and a haunting score to match. Best of all, you can finish it in under 10 hours, so it's a single weekend kind of game. Just a lovely little package all around this one. That's Death's Door. This next one is for everyone out there who's waiting for Silksong, and if the view count on my video about why Silksong is taking so long is anything to go by, that's a lot of you. But this is a vastly underrated indie gem. Imagine if Hollow Knight had a kid brother, a tiny, cuter, goofier game, but basically made of the same stuff. That's Haiku the Robot, a solo dev project that's small but perfectly formed. It's a sci-fi Metroidvania with a Game Boy style color palette. I really like the simplicity of these lovingly made graphics. In this game you play as Haiku, who is born from a little machine pod at the start of the game. He's an Amnesiac protagonist no less, maybe the third or fourth we've had in the video. You step out and you start exploring a super intriguing post-human underground. You fall down a giant trash chute into a big pile of rubbish, and then you start to explore. There are factories, there are ruins and more, and you'll slowly piece together what happened to this world and what it might become next. Being a Metroidvania, of course there's skills that unlock new areas, and being a post-Hollow Knight game, you'll find some quizzical, interesting characters to talk to along the way. I had a really good time with this game. The map was good enough to get me where I needed to be, the combat was fun, the puzzles were good, and I saw credits in about 10 hours again. I don't think that good games have to be long or complicated, and this game is neither. It does everything it needs to do and it does it well. So if you're waiting for the feast of Silksong, think of this game as a canapé to keep you amused in the meantime. That's Haiku the Robot. I'm a sucker for cyberpunk settings, and few games on the Switch did it better than Ruiner, a brutal isometric brawler with a kick-ass setting in 2091 Renkok. In this game you play as, let's see if you can guess, all say it together now, yep, an amnesiac protagonist. You're a mercenary controlled by a hacker called Wizard, who has sent you to take down a crime lord simply called Boss. Your character has a screen for a face, and it flashes up Kill Boss repeatedly in red text as if that's your single overriding thought, but midway through the mission, a hacker called Her breaks into your brain, christens you Puppy, and tells you that something else entirely is going on. Your brother has been kidnapped and you need to stop what you're doing and go and rescue him. This starts you off on a rampage through the Renkok underworld. I like that there was a really cool block of the city that acts as a hub section that you can return to between missions. You can walk around and take it all in before heading out into the missions to plow through gangland, factories and corporate facilities. There are of course different skills and weapons, but the thing that stood out to me is an innovative skill tree where you can reroute power to different aspects of your character at any time. This means that you're not locked into your choices, and if you're struggling in a hard boss fight, you can change up your skills and your build entirely. I had a couple of really satisfying moments where a boss that felt impossible started to feel manageable just because I'd rerouted power to a different kind of weapon or ability. And while the gameplay is fun, it was the aesthetic of this one that won me over. That screen-faced protagonist just looks cool as hell, the characters are just what I wanted them to be, and the world is a junk-filled neon cyberpunk nightmare. There were even some side quests to enjoy, allowing you to walk around and soak it all in. This is a really cool game, so cool in fact that Universal have bought up the movie rights and it's now in production as a film. So play it now, you can be a hipster later and say that you were there before it was cool. That's Ruiner. At number 17 we have a much more wholesome proposition. It's The Wild at Heart, developed by Moonlight Kids and published by Humble Games. This one is very much at home on the Switch because it's deeply Nintendo inspired in the best possible way. It has elements of Pikmin in the spritelings that you collect, little packs of creatures that follow you around that you can use for puzzles and so forth. It has elements of Luigi's Mansion with your Dust Buster vacuum pack, and it has elements of both Zelda and Metroid in the top-down gated exploration style of the map. It's also a memorable forest fairy tale with a gorgeous hand-drawn art style and a hypnotic, melodic, Amos-Ruddy soundtrack. You play as a kid who runs away from home and finds themselves in the deep woods where a group called the Green Shields have been struck by a forgetting condition. Their knowledge is drifting away as a darkness creeps over the world, and you're tasked with finding the lost Green Shields who are just wandering out there, who will then return to the hub and open up new shops and skills for you. I love a game where you're putting the old gang back together, and it was really fun exploring this deep forest, the washed out grey beaches, the purple fungal caves, and the chilly mountains. Unlocking new types of spritelings was always really fun because you can go back and do loads of stuff you couldn't do before, and all of the characters you meet feel like they've leapt from the pages of some kind of Nordic fable. There's a really cool day-night cycle as well with different abilities you learn that help you get through the night. This is one of the best Zelda-likes that I've played, so strap on your backpack, switch on your torch, and head into the deep woods of The Wild at Heart. That takes us to number 16, and I think that some viewers out there might be thinking, what the hell are all these oddball indie games? Where are the big indie hits that I know and love and I want to see on this list? Well, some of them are certainly coming, but this is one more for the wish list if you haven't played it already. It's a really unique game by Inkle, and it's called Heaven's Vault. In this game, you play as a space archaeologist and linguist who embarks on a missing person case when a fellow academic falls off the map. The case takes you out traveling between planets on a trusty ship looking for clues. Along the way you'll find some intriguing historical sites where you try to decipher the mysteries of this deep, storied, dusty galaxy. This involves literally decoding what texts might mean. You have to learn to recognize alien-looking letters or try and extrapolate what sentences might mean from your initial guesses. You'll finally get some of your words confirmed and it will all start to come together. You can visit an astral university to learn new letters from scholars, you can buy black market antiques to look for engraved clues, and you can delve into eerie, forgotten catacombs in search of finds that nobody has touched for eons. And even though you're looking for a missing person, what you end up doing is uncovering some deep secrets that could change this place forever. Because this is an inkle game, it supports failure as a valid outcome. In fact, if you rush through the game and you can't translate the chunky final texts, you can play through again and keep your lexicon with you. This allows you to make different choices, to fill out your dictionary, and to find out what's really happening. I would say if you like the scenes in Indiana Jones where he's blowing the dust out of sandy carvings and translating ancient texts, this game will give you that fantasy. The writer John Ingold has even published a 2-part novelization of the game. If you're hungry for more, that's Heaven's Vault. We're halfway through this top 30 now, and the stakes are about to raise considerably. The next 4 games are all titles that might top someone else's list. At number 15, I have Playdead's Inside, a creepy, wordless journey that won many Game of the Year awards when it first released in 2016. As you might note, that is before the Switch released, but hey, this is my personal list, and this game dropped on Switch in 2018. That's when I played it. I associate it with the Switch, and so I've squeezed it in here. And you know, unique is an overused phrase when it comes to describing games, but I think that Inside really is unique. In this game, you play as a little boy in a red shirt who is running through a forest from left to right. You creep between giant trees and slither through streams, avoiding snapping guard dogs and men with torches and cars that seem to be searching for you. You move into dark, industrial-sized spaces where very bad things are happening, drawing closer and closer to the final act. And let me just say, that final act is quite dark and twisted and surreal. You shouldn't eat your dinner right before playing it. But gross out factor aside, this game tells a horrifying story that's open-ended and satisfying at the same time, and that's a hard tightrope to walk. I think this game felt right playing it on a handheld too. That's Inside. My comment section has popped off before about my placement of Hades in the best games of the 2020s video that I made a couple of weeks ago, and I guess they will again on this one, but I think 14th is the right spot for me for Hades. This is the godlike roguelike from Supergiant, in which you play Zagreus, the son of Hades, who is intent on breaking out of the underworld. He's going in search of his missing mother Persephone, which involves working your way up to ground level through 4 biomes of hell. These levels always come in the same order, which I found a little bit samey, but because it's a roguelike, there is some variation involved. You get different weapons, you get randomly generated boons from the gods of Olympus, and these boons can change everything. You get splash damage from Poseidon, you can get woozy status effects from Aphrodite, you can get wintry powers from Demeter, and so forth. The combat is incredibly fast and slick. It's got to be some of the best top-down video game combat ever. It really rewards aggression and high-speed gameplay. It's pretty hard in the beginning too. When the odds are impossible, you'll die, retry, and die again, but each time you're reborn stronger with some more story unlocks back in the House of Hades, which is an excellent hub that opens up gradually over time. And along the way, you'll encounter Orpheus and Eurydice, Sisyphus and his boulder, the Minotaur, Cerberus, and many other characters from Greek mythology. You know, Supergiant always shines in all aspects, the art, the writing, the music, and the gameplay, but for me this is the most normal feeling of their games. I like it when they swing big creatively, so Pyre remains my favourite Supergiant game, but Hades is nevertheless a stone-cold classic. There's no two ways about it, and who knows, there might be one more Supergiant game on this list, but for now, that's Hades. Speaking of Stone Cold classics, how about Slay the Spire, my 13th placed game on this Best Indie Games on the Switch. This is the card game that set the world on fire and paved the way for an explosion in the roguelike deck builder genre that's still going on today. It's a card battling roguelike with a multitude of builds that differ from run to run, and there's a push-pull to the combat where you can play attack cards, but you can also see what your enemy is going to do, so you know how much you have to play in defense as well. It's a tug-of-war combat style that never really gets old. There are all kinds of enemies with devious abilities abilities to crack your build wide open, but you also unlock new cards as you progress that allow for different playstyles. There are also scores of artifacts you can pick up that alter things in interesting ways. I have over 100 hours in this game, and I played it on Switch, but when it came out for iOS, it was kind of fatal. It works very, very well on a touchscreen. It's a dangerous game to have in your pocket. Before long, you'll have set the speed to high, and you'll be dragging and dropping your cards with intuitive ease. There are also 3 characters to play, each with different moves and a playstyle of their own, and should you ever actually manage to slay the Spire, the sequel is going into early access this year. This is just a brilliant game, and it's a genuine landmark in the roguelike deck building genre. That's Slay the Spire. At number 12, I have Far Lone Sails, a quintessential Switch indie game for me. This is a devoutly artistic game made by the small team at Okomotive. It picked up a cult following, it got some critical recognition, and then a fandom, and then some indie game awards. The sequel launched straight onto Game Pass, and Okomotive's next game, Hurdling, looks like another big leap. But that journey wouldn't have started without a strong first step, and Far Lone Sails is the vehicular traversal game that started it all rolling. In this game, you play as a tiny person in a giant world. At the start of the game, you set out from your house where you're standing at a gravestone. Then you embark on a journey on a giant, slow-rolling vehicle. Making it go means fanning the flames of the furnace, venting steam when the pressure gets too high, adding fuel that you hop out and pick up along the way, raising the sail to use the wind and lowering it in a storm, and sometimes even literally pulling the truck along when the going gets tough. The vehicle becomes a home and a character in the game in itself, and as we roll through a broken down, flooded, wrecked, abandoned landscape, it's up to us to piece together what might have happened here. It's a short game, clocking in at just a couple of hours, but it left a big impression on me. I'll never forget those moments where the pressure of running the vehicle suddenly eases. The wind blows strong, the engine is cool, the camera zooms out, and you just take in the churning, starlit sky above, listening to Joel Shock's gorgeous math folk soundtrack. After the intensity of the moment-to-moment, getting the vehicle to move, it felt like a big reward. It was a moment of peace in a busy life. That's Far Lone Sails. I foreshadowed my number 11 pick in the Hades section, but Hades is actually my third favourite Supergiant game. Second to Pyre is Transistor, an ornate, high sci-fi story with music at its heart. You play as a club singer called Red in the sci-fi city of Cloudbank, and when her lover is killed at one of her concerts by a cabal called the Camarada, he becomes imprisoned in a greatsword that Red then carries with her. This is the Transistor, and he talks to her on the journey. You move through various areas of the city on a quest for answers and revenge, and it's a really amazing place to experience. There is a deep well of lore to read if you want to. The Art Deco style has a certain ease about it, the music is just lush, and it has a turn-based combat system with some innovative effects like pairing abilities to create hundreds of different outcomes, and having to change up your most used abilities when they overheat and go into a cooldown for a few battles, so it forces you to think on your feet. It's just a lush, sultry, enticing kind of game with a lot going on behind the scenes. And while Hades is clearly more accomplished in gameplay terms, Transistor far outstrips it in style and story and melancholy and imagination. I guess making lists like this makes me reveal what I really value in games, because it's the intensely artistic Transistor that comes in 11th in my best ever Switch indie games. Just before we break into the top 10, it's time for a brief intermission. If you're still watching here, I'm going to guess that you're a huge fan of indie games, and I want to give you some good news. There is a community of like-minded people waiting for you in the Gaming in the Wild Patreon Discord. It's the nicest corner of the internet to hang out and talk about games away from the disaster that is the gamer internet and social media. We have game discovery channels, we have play-alongs, we have channels to discuss forthcoming and new releases, and lots more besides. I'm in there every day, and there's lots of nice people there too. You're welcome to come and join the fun yourself by hopping into the Patreon at any tier, from £1 up to 10 if you can spare it. Small channels like mine hardly make any money from YouTube revenue, so viewer support actually means everything. Every new patron allows me to spend more time making videos for you all, and I try hard to make being a patron worth your while. There are 15 bonus podcasts, there are blogs about how I make the videos, there's behind the scenes content creation chat, and of course the Discord community, which is a genuine alternative to social media. So jumping into the Patreon from just $1 a month gets you all that and more. I'd like to say a big thank you to my recently joined patrons, Pascal, James, Chakotay, Ariel and Lee, and a big thank you to my boss tier patrons Hollow and Shy Guy as always. The link is on the screen now if you want to join, and with that, let's get on with the video. At number 10 we have Chicory, A Colourful Tale. And I think indie games that pay tribute to Nintendo feel especially right on the Switch. There's something nice about indie games that wear their heart on their sleeve, games that are clearly made by people who, like many of us, grew up loving Nintendo. Chicory is one such game. It takes the 2D Zelda formula of a map that's cut into 4 sections, gated by abilities that you pick up along the way, with different biomes, different enemies and bosses to face, and so forth. So it's a very comfortable play, but it also adds a lot of interesting stuff to the mix. In this game, you live in a black and white world where an artist laureate is tasked with colouring in the worlds. And when the artist of the moment falls depressed, they hand their magical brush to the cleaner. That is us, a humble, naive, innocent puppy who steps out in the world to try and help Chicory. But in practice, this means they quickly end up becoming the brush wielder themselves. And you know, Zelda has never had a very deep story, for me at least. I know there's lore there, but the story itself is usually that we save a princess and defeat an evil wizard again and again and again. And Chicory layers on some modern sensibilities in a way that Nintendo rarely tries to. It's a game about creative confidence, personal strength and weakness, and depression. How we can think ourselves into a hole, and how we can need help to dig ourselves out. So while it's a silly, cute game, you get to splash paint around on screen and make terrible slapstick MS Paint artworks that will go up on gallery walls, the story also has layers, and it rings true. I think this is a rare and special game, and that's why it's at number 10 on my best Switch indies list. That's Chicory, A Colourful Tale. If Slay the Spire slammed the doors open for roguelike deck builders, it was the hulking Balatro that walked on through next. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but I think this is the best digital card game of all time. The amount of joker combinations, the deck permutations, the card transformations, it's an astoundingly intricate Rube Goldberg machine where you kind of build a machine in every single run that works in a different way. There is an astounding amount of builds you can make in this game that gives it a certain feeling of endlessness that I've never felt before in a deck builder. I have over 100 hours in this game and I've never once felt like I'm grinding, like I did in Slay the Spire for example. One early weird joker pull can still lead me into a kind of deck that I haven't fully grokked before. This is the card game to end all card games. It's sold millions, it's won awards on the biggest stages in gaming. It is an indie game legend that was born before our very eyes last year when it catapulted out of Steam Next Fest and became a worldwide sensation. If you haven't played it yet, then I guess you still have 100 hours that I don't have that you maybe spent on picnics or in nightclubs or having dinners with friends or becoming ripped or whatever people do spending their time. But hey, jump on in anyway, the water is warm, no regrets. That's Balatro. And if Chicory tugs on your heartstrings, then Spiritfarer straight yanks them. This is a truly gorgeous indie game in which you run a ship that ferries the living to the afterlife. That might sound innocuous enough, but man, this game is an emotional one. Because the thing is, when you're ferrying these creatures to the end of their life, you really get to know them on the way. You get to know their stories, you get to know their histories. Whether it's playing the part of a daughter to an old lady whose memory has left her, working through the feelings of someone who is heading onwards to the afterlife with their broken heart still unresolved, or unraveling the stories of people who seem initially dodgy but become increasingly tragic. Each passenger has a meaningful story, and the moment when you take them to the Everdoor and hug them goodbye will leave even the hardest-hearted game player with a lump in their throat. There is a great game in here too. You sail between islands with towns to explore, you fish for resources, cut down trees, you upgrade your boat, you can arrange and improve cabins and facilities, stacking them on top of each other for easier access, you can catch shooting stars from the night sky and go fishing at sunset. The resource management is made enjoyable by the sense of purpose that I felt in this game. I even did some farming in this one without complaining. It's a wonderful game, it's a must play, it's an iconic indie game that was just perfect for the Switch. That's Spiritfarer. At number 7 we have Citizen Sleeper. Now I love sci-fi games with deep worlds, great stories that can transport me out of my own world for a while. Games where you kind of wake up after a session and realise that you were completely immersed in what was happening on the screen. Citizen Sleeper is one such game. It's a dice-rolling RPG where you play as a sleeper, that is, a replica human consciousness injected into a robot body to work off debt, while the original sleeps in suspended animation. Plot twist, sleepers feel like slaves and they try to escape this servitude. You are a sleeper that did just that, and you've washed up on Erlin's Eye, a storied space station and a self-contained world of its own. As a refugee, you're in a precarious position, and each morning you can roll dice and choose where you want to spend them. You can plug a 6 into a dangerous task for an auto win. You can spend your 1s and 2s sunbathing to harvest light as energy. Maybe you can spend your 3s and 4s trying to find the insulin-like drug your body needs to continue existing, or tugging on the threads of the various stories. And there are quite a few stories to follow, like following in the footsteps of a sleeper who got here before you, trying to forge contacts in the underworld that can keep you housed and safe, or trying to delve into the deeper systems of Erlin's Eye and seeing what lies at the foundations that the station was built upon. It's an amazingly deep world, it's emotional, it's sensitively written, and it's a surprisingly addictive video game. You'll play just one more cycle for hours at a time. The sequel that came out this year is a worthy companion piece that you can play if you want more. And I'd also say that Gareth Damian Martin's first game, In Other Waters, was in several drafts of this list, so be sure to check out those games as well, but Citizen Sleeper is the game that's 7th on my best Switch indies list. At number 6 we have Hyperlight Drifter. Now Heart Machine have become a world famous indie studio that's worked with Annapurna on Solar Ash and Devolver on the forthcoming Possessors. This in addition to working on their worryingly long in development and still not very fun somehow MMO Hyperlight Breaker. But it all started with the excellent Hyperlight Drifter. It's a top-down pixel art game with hard-as-nails combat, a thrilling, resonant, desolate world to explore, a gorgeous synthy disaster piece soundtrack, and that all-important Alex Preston signature aesthetic. We have an ill protagonist who seems to have a tenuous hold on life with visions of blood and dark ghosts. He coughs up blood even after victory and feels both powerful and yet fragile in the world. And I always think of this game as one of the faces on the indie Mount Rushmore, a game that everyone has played, surely. I'm always having conversations with very well-read gamers who skipped it for some reason. They bounced, they didn't get around to it, and I'm always so surprised. I mean, this game is an absolute classic. I mean, I will freely admit that it took me a while to master it. The bosses will wreck you, you can walk in any direction, you can feel lost. It is a wall of difficulty that you have to walk through, but if you persevere and find your way in and eke out the power-ups to get stronger, bosses that once felt impossible suddenly feel attainable. And I don't like intentionally hard games, as I often say. Isn't life hard enough, you know? But something about the vulnerability and vision of this game captured me. I'm so glad that I played it, and it was the perfect Switch indie. Play it if you haven't. That's Hyperlight Drifter. I've said before that games don't have to be long to be good, and I stand by that thoroughly with this next pick, because my 5th favourite indie game of all time on the Switch is A Short Hike. This is a game that you can finish in just under an hour if you really try, but speedrunning this game is just not the way to play. You should read the room, slow your roll, and spend a bit of time taking it all in instead of rushing straight to the end. In this game you play as Claire, a young bird on a summer vacation at Hawk Peak National Park, an island where your Aunt May is a ranger. People here hang out in the summer, they camp, they climb, they swim and they chill. They paint landscape paintings from viewpoints, they play beach stickball on the beach, and sometimes they climb to the top of Hawk Peak, the mountain in the centre of the island. It's a sunny day when Claire tentatively starts that hike, but she starts to pick up steam along the way. She gathers golden feathers that lets her climb higher and glide for longer. She finds a shovel to dig up cash and buy useful things. There are side quests to do and people to meet. You can even find hot springs that rejuvenate your energy along the climb. Eventually, you can make your way to the top of the mountain and maybe find out why Claire has been sad the whole time. This game is just a joy. It's a breath of fresh air. It's innocent, heartfelt, funny and charming. It feels uncynical and earnest, but also wry and self-aware. Seems like a game that was made for the love of making games, and as I've said before, it evokes the feeling of a walk on a summer's day where you have nowhere to be and you just waft out of the house, walk into the warm air and follow your nose. That's what this game feels like. It's a little holiday in video game form. It's number 5 on this list. That's A Short Hike. And you might have noticed by now that emotional impact is a running theme in the games I've picked for my list. It's something that I value a lot, and that is double true for Sayonara Wild Hearts. It's another game with a flawless aesthetic, a sense of joyous exuberance, super enjoyable arcadey gameplay, and a story of heartbreak that really hits home hard by the finale. At the start of this game, our protagonist suffers heartbreak and she slips into the deep neon of her internal world. She races through levels that seem to represent the different stages of grief perhaps, or getting over heartbreak. We have empty cities where she races against a masked antagonist. We have a forest where she chases a deer while the ground seems to crumble beneath her feet. The gameplay changes from level to level, but generally it has some cocktail of an endless runner, a rail shooter, and a collectathon. When you race in this game, you usually just control the direction, so it's about avoiding obstacles and finding pickups like tarot cards that will give you crumbs of poetry. But you can also get silver, gold, and S ranks, adding replayability as you try and polish off the levels and perfect your scores. Each level also has a lush Scandinavian pop track that it's built around, think The Knife, but less haunted. It's just a surreal and beautiful game. It has classic arcade gameplay, dusted with contemporary style and magic. It made me cackle with glee, it brought tears to my eyes. It's a wonderful game. That's Sayonara Wild Hearts. From bright neon to pitch black, we are now in the top 3, and the next game was my game of the year in 2022. It's a card game that is more than meets the eye. It is Inscription by Daniel Mullins, the maker of The Hex and Pony Island. Now this game is an oddity in many ways. It's a first-person card game for a start, where you look across the table at 2 beady eyes looking back. You can get up and walk around the room and find safes and clocks and skulls and puzzles. You might even uncover a new card, and that card might just start talking to you. At the heart of this one, there is quite a brilliant deck builder based on a game jam game called Sacrifices Must Be Made. You start by laying squirrel cards, which you can then sacrifice to lay elks and wolves and bees and so forth. You can find ways to bloodily hack different cards together. You'll find tools that you can use increasingly horrible ways to get through a sticky encounter, and all of the while you're getting closer to the root of the mystery. Who are you? Where are you? And who are you playing cards against? Of course, I won't spoil any of those answers, but suffice to say, this game is not afraid to pull the rug from under your feet. It is a rabbit hole that keeps going and going. It is a game that sent shivers down my spine and ultimately left me reeling at how wild a story it spins. This is an audacious, ambitious, unpredictable indie game. This is one you simply cannot skip. Even if you don't think you're a deck builder person, just trust me on this one. It's a game with a story and mechanics that will thrill anyone that's interested in games. It's number 3 on my best Switch indies ever. That's Inscription. Kentucky Route Zero is a game I've talked about a lot on this channel. It haunts the edges of my imagination. It's like a mood unto itself, or a place I dreamed of once. It's a game that isn't trying to be a game in any of the ways we traditionally think of. There's no reaction time or lateral thinking to solve puzzles or skill improvement or powering up over time. There are no lives, no points, no inventory. It's a freewheeling journey through a mysterious underworld, and you're just along for the ride. The question isn't whether you will win, it's whether you can understand what the game is doing and whether you can receive the gift it's trying to give. This is a game made by artists, and it's an artwork as such as much as it is a game. But quibbling over definitions is really not that interesting, especially when we could be talking about journeying on the Zero. It's a magical underground where lost souls come to try and flourish beneath the long roots of the society above. We meet playwrights, painters, and travellers, lost musicians, lost children, lost souls. We watch plays and concerts, we read books worth of dialogue, we play experimental text adventures built by people who live in giant underground cave networks. We watch experimental TV, we travel down a ghostly river through a bat sanctuary to a place where things end. The whole game happens in the course of one long night, but it feels like years. If you do play this game, if you haven't already, then try and slow down and open your racing mind. See if you can receive what the game is trying to give to you, because it's something very special. It's number 2 on my best Switch indies of all time. It's Kentucky Route Zero. And that brings us to the top of the list. I think that people who watch the channel regularly or listen to the weekly podcast, link in the description for that by the way, they're probably wondering, what's happened here? Why has John not put Kentucky Route Zero at number 1? Has the earth become square? Are cats living peacefully with dogs? Well, in this video specifically, I'm talking about indie games and the Switch. And there is an indie game that I think defines the Switch as a console in a way that nothing else really does. That game is Hollow Knight, the sprawling Team Cherry masterpiece Metroidvania. It first released on Steam to limited acclaim at the time, but when it launched on Switch, it somehow went stratospheric, selling millions upon millions of copies and becoming a legend in its own right. This game is a piece of magic. It is a sprawling underworld, and we start at the top, just a small, insignificant shell in the town of Dirtmouth. But as we delve ever deeper, slowly but surely, and with many deaths along the way, we start to uncover something huge. This game too gives the feeling of a magical underworld in a very different way to Kentucky Route Zero. Here, it's a vast dead hive with husks of insects alive still, somehow. It's a culture ravaged by something, and we all need to get to the bottom of that. But there are survivors to meet along the way. There are tricksters and innocents and evils. And the sheer scale of the Hollow Nest, the ornate art, the haunting score, all combine to make it an unforgettable journey into the unknown. For the record, this game is hard as hell. It really pushed me to my limits and past them, and it's packed with secrets that will take completion above 100%, interestingly. The final part is literally called the Path of Pain, so be ready for that. And even as you struggle through the hard yards of those early hours, know that it is worth it. For me, this is a game that was inspired by Metroid, but really does eclipse the source material. So on a Nintendo console, what greater compliment can there be, really? It's an all-timer, it's a legend, it's just a beautifully crafted thing. That is Hollow Knight, my number 1 indie game ever on the Nintendo Switch. But stick around now, and let's talk about some of the games that I didn't pick. Now, I can already imagine what's going on in the comments section, so I want to finish with some beloved games that you might have been expecting to see here that just didn't make my personal list. Maybe they're not favourites of mine, or maybe I didn't get around to playing them, maybe they don't perform well on this console specifically. So if your favourite Switch game is in this section, then please don't shout at me about it, just tell me why you love it in the comments. I love hearing people being passionate about their favourite games, and if you're still watching this video, I guess you do too. I want to mention a couple of games that weren't the right fit for the Switch hardware. These are great games that are best played elsewhere if you have the option. If the Switch is your only option, then give them a whirl, because they're all fantastic, but at least you'll be forewarned about the issues. Outer Wilds is an all-timer that was simply too big for Switch. Disco Elysium has some epic load times that make it drag. Stray loses the enticing graphical fidelity and effects that really made that world pop. Solar Ash and the Pathless trade on fast, fluid moment that just didn't translate to the Switch. And this next one is a little painful. It's my 2024 go-to 1000 times Resist, which many people in the Discord said had issues on Switch with stuttering and crashes. Now please do play those other games any way you can, even if that is the Switch, but you're a little forewarned about the technical issues, and if you have the option of a Steam Deck or a computer, or another console, that's the place to play. Finally, I want to talk about Celeste, a game that is synonymous with the Switch. It's a classy pixel art precision platformer that a lot of people love to death, with a big heart and a powerful story, but it was just too hard for me. I couldn't play it. I quit a few worlds in, it just frustrated me too much, so it's not here. I also skipped the Ori games, a pair of iconic Metroidvanias with lush, deep 2.5D graphics, challenging bosses, tight platforming, and a nice melancholic pixel feel. But I already had Haiku the Robot and Hollow Knight on the list, and I like them more honestly, so I bumped these Metroidvanias for something else. Finally, Stardew Valley, with 7.9 million copies sold on Switch, it's the biggest selling indie on the console. I played 9 or 10 hours of it, and I kind of burned out on the loop. I just don't gel with farming games, man. So yeah, no Stardew, sorry about it. A couple of others that I've just never played, I'm just one person, so I haven't played everything. I haven't played Shovel Knight, I haven't played Return of the Obra Dinn, Cuphead, or Enter the Gungeon, at least not long enough to play us here. If you think I should really play one of those games and it might change my list around, then tell me which one, tell me why, maybe I'll get to it soon. And with that, I'm going to round up this epic YouTube video. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope it was a walk down memory lane. I hope that maybe you found a game you haven't played before to put on your wish list. And maybe if you heard about games that you too love, that it was a fun experience for you. I will finish by saying that if you've watched to the very end, then please do join the Patreon. I will flash a link up on the screen now. Sub to the channel for more like this, give it a like, share it with a friend, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.